welcome to Tell Me Your Story, New Paradigms for a New World. I'm Richard Dugan, your host, and I got to tell you, today's program, man, you are going to want to take notes, record it, download. I don't care what you do. You're going to need to refer to this program again and again and again, and I'll tell you why. First of all, we're here on Sundays at 7 a.m. and 7 p.m. and Monday mornings at 1 a.m., but also our special edition of Tell Me Your Story is on Wednesdays at 9 a.m., streaming live at those times at richarddugan.com. We have the podcast. I'll tell you about those locations a little later. We have the video cast as well, and we have a very special guest on the program today. Now, I go by Reverend Dr. D because I am a reverend, and I have been given the moniker of Dr. D, or audio physician, primarily because of archival work that I do. But our guest today also has two very interesting designations, shall we say. He is not only a chef, he is also a doctor. Chef Dr. Mike is with us here on the program, and we are going to talk about probably something that encompasses every single aspect of your existence, my existence, and the rest of the planet's existence. We're going to title it Culinary Medicine. Chef Dr. Mike, thanks so much for joining us on the program. I saw the video that they sent me a link to. I watched the whole thing from PBS, the special that you had. I was blown away, only because it's like, my God, I've been saying this kind of stuff, not with the expertise that you have, don't get me wrong, but I've been saying these same things for decades. Thanks for being with us.
Oh, my pleasure. And, you're not the first person who's told me that, Richard. I mean, I kind of tell folks, our distillation of the data and kind of where we are. And I get the same response, like, well, that's just kind of common sense, isn't it? And it really is. So I want the folks to relax. We're not going to get into the weeds. There's nothing complicated about this. And I think, as you mentioned, a lot of what we will talk about and kind of distill out, really when folks think about it, it's a whole lot of common sense.
It really is. I'm going to throw a couple things out to you. Now, I remember when organics first hit the grocery stores. Small little sections, and again, to grow and grow and grow. Then you had these specialty stores pop up. Like here in California, here in the Santa Barbara County area, we've got a place called Sprouts and Lazy Acres. I think Phoenix, we had, what was it? AJ's, I think it was. We also had another one, Trader Joe's and Whole Foods. And to my point, a few years ago in Ventura, there was a farmer who got nailed because he was labeling his strawberries organic. And when they did the research, they found out, and he got nailed big time. Just recently, and I'm sure you heard the story about Whole Foods and their meat. And they were labeling it organic. They were labeling it no hormones, no whatever else it is that they put into the cows or the cattle. And then it turns out they've had it for years. And I have said regarding organic, you can slap a label on anything and call it whatever you want, and people will buy it until you get caught. My personal observation about Whole Foods is I have a feeling they're done. Mm-hmm. I can't trust them to make sure that what I'm buying from them, and I'm not sitting here trying to undermine them. I'm just saying, if I can't trust you to sell me what you're telling me you're selling me that is organic and so on and so forth, all natural, blah, 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 with the meat, how can I trust you on anything else?
Well, that's absolutely right. And I could tell you as a chef, like most things in life, it's really about our relationships, right? And so as a chef, particularly, when I ran a kitchen, It was all about my relationship, with my producers, whether that, was back in the day, folks, going down to Chesapeake Bay, whether it was local farmers growing, vegetables, etc., whomever it is. In the PBS special, we focus on bison here in Montana, and, Troy down at Bitterroot Bison, and knowing that, what he's telling me he's doing is actually what he's doing. And you bring up a great point, because as consumers, then we rely on people like the folks running Whole Foods, that when they tell us, hey, we vetted this for you, you can trust us. We're going to charge you more for it. We've done the work, etc. You put your faith in them and you put your money behind it. And then, like in any relationship, once that trust is broken, boy, it's pretty hard to build that back. So, yeah, I agree 100%, and I encourage folks, not to give up, not to get soured on that. But it may require a little bit of work on our end as consumers to really kind of research a little bit and vet our producers. I mean, the great thing is that there are so many folks out there doing it the right way. And
Mhm.
and I can also speak locally, certainly the area you're in as well. There are a lot of local growers who don't slap an organic label on it, because unfortunately it's harder and more expensive to grow food the way it should be grown than to grow it loaded with pesticides and herbicides and chemical fertilizers, etc. And so a lot of these folks actually, meet organic standards or exceed them, but they
Mhm.
don't put that label on it because it's too expensive. And as you said, if you get caught and it's just an error in the bookkeeping, man, the government's going to come down on you, and those fines can break small businesses. So we have, a great guy, a great little local CSA that we participate in. And I go down there and I see how he grows it. I see the chickens out in the field, and I know the things that I'm getting from there actually exceed what it would take to get an organic label. So there's lots of options up there. Don't give up hope. But yeah, Whole Foods, they're going to have to work pretty hard to build that trust back.
Indeed, indeed, and another area, and you being a doctor, and folks, this gentleman isn't just any old doctor. He is in the cardiovascular field. All right. And I have learned a great deal because my wife has worked in cardiology for probably close to 50 years. She worked for Mayo. She worked for Arizona Heart. She worked for several other places, including locally here in Santa Barbara, Sansum Clinic, both back in the 80s. And then, of course, when we returned here 16 years ago. And so I've learned an awful lot about that. And I have always reminded her how important her job is as an MA and as a tech and so forth, because she is dealing with not just an organ, but on a metaphorical, metaphysical level, an area of the soul or the spirit of an individual that is, it's vital. But one of the things that I wanted to ask you about is, especially when it comes to culinary medicine, I've made this comment many times when we talk about health and wellness and so forth, preventative medicine, if you will, that we have the greatest pharmaceutical company in the universe, and that's the human body. However, the caveat is, unless you are supplying your body with the proper elements to manufacture those chemicals, those pharmaceuticals, that will help your body to operate at its optimal level. You can't think straight. Your emotions are all over the place. And the list goes on of issues, not to mention the physiological damage or changes, shall we say, that one does to the body. To me, when I saw that phrase in the video from PBS, culinary medicine, I'm going, I've never heard that phrase before, but man, is that right on. Talk to us about all of this.
Well, sure, and I agree, 100%. And really, again, it kind of goes back to relationships. So our relationship with our food is really the foundation stone of a culinary medicine approach. So people often say, hey, Chef Dr. Mike, it's great. I'm all about nutrition too, and food is fuel, and all that approach. Food is medicine. And I'm like, look, I'm an interventional cardiologist. So just so folks know, that means that when people were having heart attacks at 2 a.m., I'm the guy that got called in to open that artery up, put a stent in, use those powerful pharmaceuticals, you just referenced in an emergency situation. And that is important to be able to do that. When we have a saying in medicine, right? First, stop the bleeding. When there's an emergency, we have to go in and we use all these modern tools, techniques, drugs, etc. And certainly I've made a career out of that, and I have no problem using them. But then we have to step back, right, and say, well, what brought you here, and where do we go from here? Now that we've put that fire out, now that we've stopped that bleeding, now that we've changed that flat tire, I don't want to send you back out on a road that's full of broken glass and nails, so that you're right back with the same thing and same situation. And so what culinary medicine does is really look at our relationship with food. And so, it's all about you. And it's all about your relationship with your food. And so that encompasses more than just nutrition. People don't realize, nutrition is actually a very young science, only about 100 and something years old. And it really started and continues, unfortunately, with a mindset of deficiency disease. So, for example, like we found, hey, if you have lemons or limes or make a margarita, right, you don't get scurvy. I.e., vitamin C, take some vitamin C, you don't get scurvy. That's a deficiency state, what we call deficiency disease. That's very different than what we suffer from today, which is a chronic disability and disease, obesity, diabetes, heart disease. They're all rooted in a systemic, ongoing, low-level inflammation that, as Hippocrates noted over 2,500 years ago, seems to start in the gut. And so how and why does it start in the gut? Well, it starts because of our relationship with our gut bacteria. And so when we eat, the way we eat, with whom we eat, when we eat, and most importantly, what we put on that plate, particularly in the United States, when we're looking at such a high level, almost 70% of the average American's diet is ultra-processed food. And these ultra-processed foods contain things that human beings, since the dawn of human beings, have rarely, never, ever eaten before in any substantial quantities. And this gut bacteria, these bacteria, the symbiotic organ that runs interference for us when we eat, we're taking the environment outside, we're putting it inside our body where we're most vulnerable. And these bacteria, man, they're the offensive line, the defensive line, running interference for us from those foods we bring in. They're exposed to things that they've never seen, that they have not evolved really to deal with. The end result, long and short, is that we start getting this inflammation, and then that starts to build and sends us in this cascade. So, our relationship with the foods we eat, them being natural foods, our relationship, restoring that balance with our gut bacteria, that's really at the heart of culinary medicine. And one of the great things is that it's not about, calories. It's not about saturated fat. Those occur naturally. It's about things that you love to eat. Today, when we're recording, it's pizza day in my house. I'm a pizza fanatic. I love pizza. But there's a huge difference between Chef Dr. Mike's, sourdough pizza that I'm crafting at home. My topping is just tomatoes and salt, some, organic grass-finished buffalo mozzarella, a few bits of basil from my windowsill, versus a delivery pizza or a chain or store-bought pizza that's got all these other ingredients in it. And so it's not about not having a pizza, it's about how we craft that pizza and bringing that enjoyment and then sharing those experiences. So, that's really where culinary medicine is different from just looking at the biological and physiological processes by which an organism uses food to stay alive. We're not cars. We don't just fuel up. we are human beings, and our emotional state, whom we eat with, whom we share that meal, all those things affect our emotional state, which affects our physiologic state, which has impacts in our health, on our health. What we eat, believe it or not, can change our gut bacteria, and these changes in our gut bacteria, believe it or not, can actually affect our emotional state. So one of the interesting things, which can get a little creepy when you think about it, is that we're actually not completely in charge of ourselves, because we are a micro environment, an organism that consists of our human cells and who we are, and the anywhere from 10 to 100 trillion bacteria that live in our body and interact with us all the time,
Yeah.
endlessly.
It is truly an amazingly designed, I'll just use the word machine for lack of a better word. We're talking with Chef Dr. Mike, and we encourage you to certainly to go to his website, and that website just so happens is, well, golly, Chef Dr. Mike, ChefDrMike. That's chefdrmike.com. And you are listening to Tell Me Your Story. I'm Richard Dugan, your host, and we're talking with Chef Dr. Mike. And one of the things that has occurred to me, I shouldn't say has occurred to me, that I was introduced to was this, this theory, I'll call it a theory, that one of the reasons why we have lost, how was this phrased? Oh, what is the one invention? I'll ask you, Dr. Mike, what's the one invention that has interfered with our connection with food? And you're going to be shocked. The one invention. I don't know how far back it goes. I haven't Googled that.
That has interfered with our connection with food.
With what we eat.
I'm going to let you enlighten me on that.
Believe it or not, it's the fork. The reason is because before utensils, we handled our food. We held it. This is how we ate. And that was the way it was done. Okay? For example, if you ever watch any of these television shows or movies that take place during the medieval times, there are no forks, spoons, or knives. Well, there might be knives because they've got the swords, but there are no forks or spoons because they handled the food with their hands. So there was that physical, visceral contact with our food. Now, today we would, say that's kind of barbaric and rude for you to be eating my meatloaf with your hands and that kind of thing. But you said something just a few moments ago, and I'm going to kind of codify it down, but you said it in the video in almost this way. You said that it is not just what we eat, it's how we eat, it's where we eat, it's who we eat with. It's the entirety that surrounds the food that we take into our bodies. And that's why I said at the front end of this program, this is going to encompass a person's entire life.
Well,
Now,
exactly, Richard. And what you describe is, again, what we were just talking about, which is that food experience.
Mm-hmm.
And if you think about it, and I could ask you, if you were to think about sort of the top 10 moments of import in your life, I guarantee you food would be involved in at least a couple of them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Whether it's a celebration, etc.
Yeah.
And expanding, on your point about the utensils, I would disagree with that slightly, in that I don't think it's the utensils. I think it's the celebration of food and the food experience with each other, that from time immemorial, right? A couple 100,000 years ago, our ancestors were, just one of a group of social primates out on the plains somewhere, trying to get by, dodging saber-toothed tigers and hunting mastodons. And then one day, one small group of primates, somebody said, you know what? I'm taking these mastodon ribs, I'm throwing them on Barbie, and we'll have a barbecue. And then we all sat around, and around the fire, and we had our food and we shared it. And there was fire and fellowship and food. And that band of social primates became human beings. And we shared an experience. And throughout the history of humankind, you can track the history of food, right? That you look at the spices and the spice trades and how that has shaped civilization. Most people, know about Rome and the fall of Rome. What they don't realize that was, along with silver and gold, one of the ransoms demanded by the barbarians of the Romans was pepper, food. Food was such a vital component. It was how Vikings bonded, with each other and got these huge raiding parties that went out and changed, the face of the globe. As you mentioned, during the Middle Ages, these earls would throw these lavish parties. And if they were generous with their food and their meat and their ale, well, it's like, I'm not going with this guy. He's kind of a cheapskate.
Yeah.
I'm not going to get my share of booty out there. I'm not raiding with him. So, food in essence, as I determine, has been social currency. And we've started to lose that in our modern society because we've become, although we have at our disposal tweets and text and everything, in a way we've become more disconnected. And so, we eat mindlessly and we don't have that sharing over the food, as you said, when, we all got around the table and we were just, hands-on at the buffet.
Yeah, it is a kind of an unfortunate thing, and I have to say that when I hear people talking about bringing back, if they've sort of lost it, bringing back the evening meal at the very least, if not lunch or breakfast. I mean, I look back, and you're talking about those moments in time. I look back not necessarily to a specific meal, but to the numerous dinners that we as a family of 8 had around the dining room table. I mean, my father built these, he built 2 of these square center supported tables that we would bring together, to use C-clamps to hold them together. We'd put a tablecloth down, we'd set the table, and then the food, we'd bring the food to the table and we'd all sit down. We always sat. I thought this was real interesting. We never changed seats. I was always sitting next to my ambidextrous sister who always ate with her left hand. I always wondered why they didn't put her on the end and me on the other end or something, so she didn't have any conflict. But it was those meals that I remember sitting around, and we did talk. And of course, then after a while, you started just hearing the clink of the silverware against the plate, because everybody was hungry. And just thinking, wow, that is really cool. And we've lost that too, because we're in such a hurry because of the way that our society, our civilization has grown, maybe grown, I'm not sure, because when you start losing some of those aspects that you just described about sitting around the fire, eating off the dinosaur ribs or what have you, or whatever the animal is, you don't have the connection, you don't have the community. And we aren't talking tribalism here, we're talking community. There's a big difference between tribalism and community. And food has usually been a part of that. We're talking with Chef Dr. Mike here on Tell Me Your Story. I'm Richard Dugan, your host, and Chef Dr. Mike, I'm curious as to your path to these 2 titles. I personally worked for a very short time in a restaurant. I started, of course, as a dishwasher. One of the frustrating things for me was back in, what was it, the 70s, I had to go get a health card. And so I went and did the state's deal. We got the health card, came back to the restaurant after getting that health card, and nobody was following the rules. Smoking in the food prep area and all these kinds of things. And I just thought, what was the point of me getting this card? So I've had that experience of knocking over a stack of plates onto the floor and many of them breaking. And of course you hear in the audience in the restaurant, oh, hey, it's like, that's not helping. Thanks a lot. But how did you get started combining the aspect of food as a chef and the medical aspects as a cardiologist?
And I want to jump real quickly right back to the story you told about eating together,
Sure.
because that's an aspect of culinary medicine. And I want to share the wisdom of what you just said with some of the actual data that we have on that. So, for example, we know, just exactly as you mentioned, look, it doesn't have to be every night, it doesn't have to be every meal, but if you can have one or two meals, particularly during the week where you come together and eat, what studies have shown is that kids who are exposed to that growing up, when they are middle-aged adults, tend to be healthier and tend to make healthier food choices. And when we look at some of the recent data, which is quite alarming, that shows that, from age 5 onwards, the average American eats about 70% ultra processed food. And Harvard has predicted a tsunami of heart disease, diabetes, and obesity in the next 15 or 20 years based on these kids eating like this and now getting into their late 20s, 30s, when we'll see the manifestation of disease as a consequence of this. What we find is that when we look, many people say, well, that's just a function of socioeconomics, and people who have money eat better. Well, the truth is, it turns out that Americans, regardless of how much money they eat, all eat like crap. So it doesn't matter what socioeconomic bracket you fall in. Almost all the kids are eating garbage. But when we look by ethnicity, what they found was that Caucasians, African Americans tend to group together, but Hispanics tended to have less ultra processed food consumption. And in digging into that data, what they found is that in Hispanic homes, there is more often exactly what you just described, where at least 1 or 2 days a week, on the weekends, they're having these larger family meals. They tend to be involved less ultra processed food because there's home cooking going on. So these kids are eating less ultra processed food, and down the road, the data suggests they're going to have health benefits for that. So it's not only sort of a nostalgia that you bring up, but an action that we look at and we study in culinary medicine, because this has broad implications for health now and public health issues, in the decades to follow. So I just wanted to comment on what an important point and great observation that you shared, and there is a lot of science and data behind that as well.
So let's talk about the connecting of being a cardiologist and being a chef. I mean, a chef. Now, it seems pretty obvious. The two really do go together because everybody's concerned about their cholesterol and of course single, double, triple, quadruple bypasses and all of that kind of stuff. And so I'm just curious as to how and when the light bulb went off in your mind. I need to bring these two together.
Well, I started in food first. So growing up in days before the internet, we moved around a lot. And so I was always kind of a new kid on the block. And, kids being kids, there was a lot of sort of ostracizing of the foreigner, of the new kid. And my mom was a great home cook. You would watch Julia Child, The Galloping Gourmet. And about the time I got home from school, she'd be in the kitchen fixing, stuff from cookbooks or what she had seen that day. And I'd jump right in. And so I really learned about food, but food also healed me. I didn't realize it at the time in the kitchen, being exposed to that. And so when I went to college and had to, help pay for college, like you talked about, food was a natural place to go. There weren't really celebrity chefs then. Nobody actually wanted to work in a kitchen back then. And so I went in and said, I'm here ready to be your chef. And they said, there's a stack of dishes. We need a dishwasher. And so they said, if you're willing to wash dishes, then as soon as something opens on the line, it's a short order place, we'll promote you there. And so they kept their word, and I washed dishes for 6 months nonstop. Then worked my way up to the line. Then went to another restaurant where I would be what we call today kind of a sous chef, a junior chef.
Hmm.
Got trained to run the back of the house as an executive chef. And then by the time I left college, going off to medical school on Friday nights or Saturday nights, depending how we divided the weekends, I would be running the back of the house as what today we would call an executive chef. Went off to medical school, internship, residency, cardiology residency, cardiology fellowship, etc. Eventually went back and got my culinary degree in gourmet cooking and catering from Ashworth University outside of Atlanta. But during that time, I had the opportunity to cook at a restaurant, which today, would be kind of spot on. I didn't appreciate, we got our seafood from the Chesapeake Bay 3 times a week. We had local farmers supplying us, our vegetables. So I really knew and was trained in kind of a locavore almost type of restaurant, although it wasn't known as such back in the day. And I got busy like a lot of people do with life, and internship and residency and cardiology fellowships are pretty demanding, on your time, on your responsibilities and calls. So I got away from what I knew good food was, and did like a lot of folks do, what was convenient and, eating on the go and what the drug reps would bring into the cath lab. I'd be grabbing those, etc. And then I had some health challenges. Doctors told me I needed surgery and I needed it like a couple of years ago. And I said, well, being a physician, the first thing I'm going to do is get a second opinion.
Hmm.
And then the second verse was same as the first. And I said, well, there's some limited options here and I'll go with that. And then what can I do? This is a result of inflammation. So I really started to look into it to heal myself, right? Physician, heal thyself. And I was, told I needed those surgeries well over, I guess, about 25, almost 30 years ago. Haven't still don't need them. So I'm still out there a little more limited in some of my joint things, but I don't have the joint replacements, and I'm still able to hike and do things. And started seeing that what I had been told to tell patients, sort of the conventional wisdom, wasn't really what the data was showing me. I spent some time doing NIH research at the University of Virginia in microvascular physiology, and I was brutalized by a PhD, mentor who was so tough because he's like, you MDs don't know how to do research. You don't know the actual scientific rigors. You guys are phonies. And so he would just grill us and really made us work hard to learn how to interpret and analyze data and what were the proper conclusions and how did you know this and what does statistical significance mean really, et cetera, so on and so forth. And so when I started looking, I was like, the data isn't matching what I'm telling people to do over here. Let me go deeper. And the deeper I went, the more I was like, well, this is really what the data is saying to do. And it took me on a path which wound up being the common sense we talked about at the beginning, which is like, eat real food. Don't eat ultra processed crap, eat real food.
Yeah.
Eat it with joy, eat it with gratitude. Those things make a difference. Share those meals. That human interaction is important. I'll give you a non-food related example. So as a cardiologist, when I look at risk factors for cardiovascular disease, one of the most potent, as you mentioned, cholesterol is one, but just as potent as any cholesterol level, Richard, is depression. Depression is as potent a risk factor for having cardiovascular disease and a heart attack as any cholesterol level. But how many times do you hear a doctor say, do things that make you happy? Try to be happy, work on depression, right? Why?
Mhm.
It's easy for me to write a pharmaceutical, check your cholesterol level, have a number to guide me. Easy, efficient. Things are written out. Hard for me to write, Richard, I want you to have 5 units of happiness every morning. I could get in trouble with your wife, depending on how you interpreted that. So because we don't really have a good way to measure it, we don't have a good way to administer it. There's no company that's selling that. we tend not to use it. But does that mean that it's not as important? Does it mean it's not real?
Yeah.
Absolutely not. From a scientific perspective, we have the data sets. So these things all come into play when we look at that food experience, when we look at culinary medicine. And so that's what I brought together, because the data really is telling us. One of my earlier books was The Fallacy of the Calorie, that for the over half century, we've been told, eat this, don't eat that. Just do what I say, watch your calories, don't eat saturated fat, don't eat eggs. Wait, eggs are okay. Oh, wait, you can have saturated fat from avocados and nuts. Oops, sorry about that. That we get beyond and start to look at this, and things that I wrote about in that book, Fallacy of the Calorie, which is about a decade old now, have really come to fruition. A couple of years ago, the government got rid of cholesterol guidelines because they said, you know what? When we look at it, there's no data that eating foods and cholesterol translates into any kind of risk factor for health. And in fact, people who eat eggs as part of their regular diet have a better lipid profile than people that abstain. So it's all about sort of getting back in the groove of our connections in a positive way with our food experience, eating real wholesome food, and eating it in a way that brings us pleasure and joy. And that is part of the chef bias for me.
Chef Dr. Mike is our guest here on the program. He's an interventional cardiologist, a professional chef, professor of culinary medicine. He's also the author of a number of books, including Food Shaman, The Art of Quantum Food, and his website is Chef Dr. Mike. That's ChefDrMike.com. We will be linked to that website as well so that you folks can find out more, not only about Chef Dr. Mike, but also about some of the other work that he does, the books and so forth. And we'll continue our conversation with him as we continue here on Tell Me Your Story. I'm Richard Dugan, your host. And Chef Dr. Mike, I am so fascinated by this conversation because it's so all-encompassing. The phrase, if you have your health, you have everything. I've heard it said, too, that, if your feet hurt, you hurt all over. Well, you know what? That's absolutely true, because your feet are the foundation upon which you walk. And if they're out of alignment, guess what? Everything else up goes out of whack, too. And I'm a prime example of that. I finally was able to get the right insoles and so forth and support. And I love walking, Doc. Tell you what, when I had a knee issue, which turned out to be a meniscus, that I went in and I had done arthroscopically, I believe. As soon as that was over, I was up walking around that day, and I haven't had a problem with that knee ever since. And it's just been great. The other aspect of it, too, is with health. I was diagnosed, Doc, a little over 2 years ago with type 2 diabetes. Okay? Now, I can tell you today, I do not have type 2 diabetes. Do you know how long it took me to get my blood sugar back down where it was supposed to be? A month and a half. Now, I remember that my doctor telling me this story of this guy whose A1C was, I don't know, it was 700 or 800 or something. I don't know what it was. And in 6 months, he managed to bring it down to 7 or 6.5 or whatever. And of course, the normal is in the 5 range. Mine was 11.5, my A1C. My blood sugar reading extrapolated from that was 275. He said it might have even peaked at 300 and that kind of stuff. Well, my big bugaboo at the time was sodas. And it wasn't so much the sugar, although I did have a really strong sweet tooth. It was the fizz. I liked the bubbles. I liked that little bite on the back of the throat. It just, I don't know, it just felt good. And I've been drinking them for decades. When I delivered newspapers as a kid, I built a cup holder on my bicycle to hold the 64 ounce, to hold that 64 ouncer. But see, I was bicycling, so I didn't gain weight. I was burning it off as I went. Anyway, the last soda I ever had was a Coke made with, it was from Mexico, as they say, because it's made with supposedly real cane sugar. Like that's supposed to make a difference. The last one I had was on the 23rd of July, 2020. And the doc says, "Hey, you know, Richard, this is going to be a long road for you, a long journey, long journey." I says, "No, it's not." I says, "I know how I got here. Not just the sodas. What did everybody else, you know this as well as I do, I'm sure. What everybody went to as far as foods when we all were locked down in March of 2020. It was comfort foods, which are processed foods, which have carbs and sugars. And that's why my blood sugar went through the roof, as it were. So we went back to our regular diet, if you will. You know, for matter of fact, that first meal that we had after I was diagnosed, we went to the local restaurant, a sit-down restaurant. We ordered their fried chicken sandwich, no bread, keep the avocado, please, and a salad, no fries. And that's how we started, and that was fine. So when I see these commercials for these different medications, it'll bring your A1C down to 7. I'm going, what? Mine was at 11.2, and I got it down to 5.7 in a month and a half. What is the deal here? Turns out, and this is something I'd love for you to address, the willpower that people don't have to follow through when they know the potential hazards. I've said before, Doc, that Chef Doc, if the Earth were to hold a seminar for the rest of the universe, it would be on crisis management. We don't know how to do preventative, but we do know how to crisis manage. Talk to us a little bit about this aspect of willpower, and how that, in and of itself, can be affected by what we're eating.
Well, first, you just nailed modern Western medicine, Richard, right? It's all crisis management. That's what we do. And really, as an interventional cardiologist, that's what I did for so many years, put out the fire. People having a heart attack, artery closed, open artery. And it actually comes, I find it often helpful to gain a perspective on things by looking at how they evolved and the history of it. And the history of Western medicine is really battlefield medicine. And so that's all about, as you said, crisis management, stop the bleeding. All the way back to Galen, working on gladiators in the Colosseum and addressing those types of injuries. And then the modern Western sort of foundation for the triage approach, developing during the Civil War with the idea of ambulances and getting these folks out and then triaging which limb you sort of had to amputate first. And then the people that you couldn't save with a gut shot, went into one area. So that concept of triage. So crisis management is exactly modern Western medicine. And so when people come and present with diabetes, right, it starts on a medication. We've got to get that blood sugar down, and that's fine. But then we don't go to solving the problem, the root cause of the problem that you addressed in your solution. And to give your listeners some statistics, which may blow their minds, and this isn't Chef Dr. Mike's opinion, this is actually Harvard University data, that 90%, and you heard that correctly, 90%, or 9 out of 10 cases of type 2 diabetes are preventable doing exactly the things that you did to recover. For people who already have type 2 diabetes, depending on where you look, anywhere from 60 to 80% of the cases can follow in your footsteps, Richard. And that is what we call a reversal, or essentially they've cured themselves of type 2 diabetes. But my frustration is your frustration, because all we see on television is none of the communication of this information and knowledge to empower people to even pursue this. It's here's another drug. And if this drug isn't working for you, we'll put this pharmaceutical on top of it. And so I think part of the challenge is that a lot of people just don't know. A lot of people, don't have the gumption and the confidence and really the medical guidance to do what you did. Because I had one of our students, we offer our culinary medicine course online, the same one we teach the students at the university. And one of my online students wrote to me and said her sister was just diagnosed as a diabetic. And she went to her doctor and said, can you help me get some dietary advice to really she wanted to do what you did, Richard. And the advice from her physician, communicated to me was, "Oh, that stuff doesn't work. It's not gonna be effective. Please just go ahead and take the medication, and then don't worry about your diet. Like, you could take the pill and then just go eat whatever you want."
Yeah.
And so that, I think, is a major impediment to these types of solutions. And it's one of you're touching on something, forgive the pun, near and dear to my heart, because this is really one of the messages and one of the missions of culinary medicine is to get out there and empower people with the knowledge, and then empower them with the technique so they can sit down like I'm going to do tonight and have a pizza that's good for them, to have a meal that they enjoy with company that they enjoy, and it's healing them and it's delicious. Going through life with a sense of deprivation about food is no way to live. And I'm going to share a quick story from a colleague of mine. And she shared this with me some years ago when we were talking about culinary medicine. And she had an elderly gentleman whom, and she was just a great diagnostician, and she had diagnosed him with an oral cancer. And so she then referred him to the specialist, and he had the surgery, chemotherapy, and radiation therapy. And she had followed him and had seen him right after 5 years. And at 5 years, for folks who don't know, if you have no trace of cancer, you're considered to be cancer-free, a cancer survivor, because statistically speaking, your risk of having that recur is about the same as the general population. So we say that's where we kind of define our cancer cures. And she's like, Mr. So-and-so, congratulations, you are cancer-free, you did it. And she said he started to tear up and he started to cry. And, she told me she started to tear up as well. And he said, Doc, I am so grateful for you. You made the diagnosis, you saved me. I thank all the doctors and the surgeons and the nurses and everyone in healthcare who helped me. But I've got to tell you, for 5 years, I have not been able to taste a single thing I've eaten. And honestly, I would have rather just died. And so that simple pleasure that we talk about, that we can get from that food experience when we share that food experience with someone, is so powerful. And we can make that a positive one, where we're eating those right foods like you talked about you doing, that are healing us, that are building us up. And as much as we can get in a negative tailspin with all, as you said, ordering Uber Eats and getting that ultra processed food delivered and getting in this negative tailspin, because the compounds in those foods, particularly the salt, sugar, and fats that are layered in there and constructed as something we call a bliss point in the food manufacturing industry, essentially works the same way in our brain as opiates. And we know as a country how successful we've been in managing our opiate addiction.
Oh,
well, food addiction, ultra processed foods is no different.
yeah. Absolutely astounding sometimes. You have to wonder what these people are thinking or not thinking. Chef Dr. Mike is my guest here on the program. Tell me your story, and we're talking about so many different things that are all connected, folks. They are all connected. He is an interventional cardiologist, professional chef, professor of culinary medicine, and he has written many books, but in particular, Food Shaman. I love the concept of a shaman, let alone a food shaman, the art of quantum food, and his website is chefdrmike.com. That's chefdrmike.com, and you are listening to Tell Me Your Story. I'm Richard Dugan, your host, and it is such a pleasure to have Chef Dr. Mike on the program here with me, Reverend Doctor, Dr. D. We talk about these subjects all the time, Chef Doctor Mike, and it's kind of nice. But there are a couple of areas I wanted to touch on with the time we have remaining. One of them is, because you've mentioned this at least more than once on the program thus far, our source information. In this country today, we have a huge problem with trusting authorities. Now, in the 60s, and I was a young kid, single digits at that time, but I do remember the phrase, all always question authority. Okay, I get that. Always question. Well, we've taken that to a new level. Don't trust authority. Don't trust the government. Don't trust the institutions. And you'll get a kick out of this one. Abraham Lincoln said, "Don't trust anything that you read on the internet." Yeah. Mm-hmm.
That must be true if he said it about the internet.
Absolutely, it must be. It's right at the end of the Gettysburg Address. But we have that issue going on in this country today. Now, what flashed in my mind when you were talking about the influences on our the various aspects, compartments, if you will, of our human beingness, I wonder what people were consuming over the course of a number of years who tried to sack the Capitol on January 6th. Because I'm not real. My friend, a dear friend of mine who passed away some years ago, had a bumper sticker. He says the bumper sticker said something, words to the effect, "I don't trust my government. It's the country that I trust." In other words, the people. Mm-hmm. We the people. And I kind of feel that way sometimes because of the contradictory information that we get. But I'm not going to jump on a plane or a train or bicycle across country to try to work my way into violently, in essence, overthrow the government. Because there's, I look at it this way. I'm on the West Coast. You're in Montana. There is nothing that either of us can do about what they're doing there in Washington, D.C. There's nothing. I mean, they say, well, you vote. Yeah, but it seems like nothing changes no matter who you vote for. So we need to be about the business of doing what we can for ourselves right here. Do it for you and me as individuals, for the family around, the people around us, and for our community. We talked about community earlier. If that means setting a fire and roasting a pig on a spit, go for it. But what about this distrust of information? And I want to throw one other element in there, our intuition. We talk about it all the time. We ask people to participate in the decade of perfect vision, the 2020s, where we ask people to go within and listen to that still small voice. Talk to us about either the connection or the dichotomy between the outside information and the inside voice.
Well, and I mentioned this earlier, sort of in my personal journey, was the realization that what I was telling people as the conventional wisdom, which I didn't question, it was sort of handed out to me from the authorities, was contradictory, it was sort of contradictory at times to my own common sense. You mentioned avocados. Mm-hmm. As a kid vacationing with my parents, we would, often go to, I grew up in the Northeast. I'm a native New York City boy and grew up around there. And so we'd go, south during the winter and, in areas where people ate, tons of avocados and they were never sick, right? There wasn't a cardiologist to be found around there. They were eating seafood and avocados and ceviche. And yet I was getting recommendations from my professional organization saying people shouldn't eat avocados because they're very high in saturated fat and that's bad. And so that was something that was very counterintuitive to me. And in that journey, as you said, I'm all about questioning authority. And I love when people question me. And that's why when I give information, if you look at my articles in the Psychology Today, where I have a column, any of the articles I write, the courses that I teach, certainly in the book, Food Shaman, I had a discussion with the publisher because the reference list is like 40 pages. And they're like, you're jacking up our publication costs and you're going to get, they're like, you're going to get less money because it's costing us more to publish this. Do we really have to have this, this huge appendix of references? And I was like, absolutely. If Chef Dr. Mike's telling somebody that they can have a steak, and they have to source it correctly. And, I'm saying, red meat, sure, you can have it if you want it, but you have to source it correctly because a drive-thru burger is not the same as a grass-finished, bison T-bone. And here's why. I better be able to give them the data. So that's why I always put it out there that if somebody looks and they say, or you say, Chef Dr. Mike, that sounds a little funky to me. And where'd you get that? Here's the study. Here's how I derived that. You're welcome to your own opinion.
Yeah.
And that's why I talk about the difference in culinary medicine is about empowering people and giving you information and tools and let you make your own decision based on that intuition, based on what's right for you. Only you know is what's right for you. You know your diet. You know what you like to eat. I don't.
Yeah.
I can't taste something for you and tell you it's good. Only you can do that. And so I want to empower people, give them the tools that they need, and let them make that decision versus how it's been done for the last over half century. Eat this, don't eat that. Take this pill, do this. And we need to sort of give the control of certainly somebody's story, which I look at the food and I can tell the story of my life through the foods I've experienced. And how much my mom loved me through her chicken soup she made me every time I was sick. And the fact that I've tried to recreate that 100 times, it's a pretty good chicken soup, but it's caca next to what my mom made. And I'm a professional chef and she wasn't, so it's those sorts of things. And I think we absolutely have to, forgive the pun, but get in touch with our gut feelings, right? And I mentioned it earlier, our gut, and I think anyone who's had a dog or a cat would say that they're intelligent creatures and they have their own personalities. Well, you have the neuronal capacity in your gut that is equivalent to a dog or cat. Many people refer to the fact that our gut was our first brain because that's where the neuronal plexus developed as single cell organisms in search of food. That was our first job as wee little, singular celled organisms. And there's this constant connection. We used to think the brain told the stomach what to do. Well, it turns out that it's more like I-95 or maybe, Interstate 4 where you are, where the traffic never stops going back and forth between the gut and the brain. In those gut signals are all these messages from the gut bacteria that's constantly interpreting our environment in terms of what we have decided to eat. If I were to draw a blood sample at any time, almost half, about 40% of the message molecules throughout your body will have originated in the gut. So these gut feelings we have, this gut brain we have, this intuition, whatever you'd like to call it, very, very real. And listen to it. It's often right because it's analyzing things and perceiving things that because of the volume of information, our conscious brain can't process. So yeah, absolutely. Listen, it came down to me when I presented my materials in my first book to my colleagues at universities, and they said, "Hey, Mike, I love this. You're spot on. Data's great. No way in hell I can give you a testimonial because it goes against everything that I'm recommending. It goes against everything from the professional organizations. I kid you not. And in secret, I support you. Go at it publicly. I'll get fired from the university. I'll lose my position here." And so, it was like, okay, Chef Dr. Mike, are you willing to take that pirate stand, hoist the black flag, and go in search of a truth? Not all treasure is silver and gold, mate. Sometimes it's a simple truth and the simple facts. And so I'm all about folks, taking that stand. Question me, ask me anytime, how did you get that? What's your data set? If this doesn't jive with what you said, and I give it to you, and listen and follow your gut. It's often attributed to the Buddha that he said, that he spoke, and I'm paraphrasing here, believe nothing, no matter where you have heard it or where you have read it, even if you heard it from me, from Chef Dr. Mike. If it does not agree with your own common sense and your own experience.
Yeah. Chef Dr. Mike is our guest here on the program. We are talking about virtually your entire existence here on the planet as it is impacted, affected, influenced, if you will, by everything that you consume. And interestingly enough, folks, it's not just through your mouth. It's through your 5 and or 6 senses. We're talking with an interventional cardiologist, a professional chef, professor of culinary medicine, and author of many books, including Food Shaman, The Art of Quantum Food. Website is chefdrmike.com. That's chefdrmike.com. We'll be linked to that website as well as we continue here on Tell Me Your Story. Chef Dr. Mike is joining us here on the program, and we're talking about the work that he is doing through both his medical and culinary expertise. And, I was thinking about this. You said something to the effect, taste, you can't taste things for us. And what that brought back to mind was the phrase that I heard on one of these cooking shows with one of the celebrity chefs, who, again, is probably a great chef. But said basically, as he's telling these competitors, be sure as you're going along, taste everything. Taste everything. And I would watch some of these people as they're going along, and they're not tasting anything. And I'm thinking, did you not hear what he said? Because to me, that is the bottom line. Because then the celebrity chefs come around and they check. Just kind of let me try it. Let me have a spoon here and. You know that this needs blah, 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 or that, or this tastes this way, that way. Our taste buds are uniquely different. And as such, you've got yourself as a chef. You're tasting everything as you're going along. To you, it tastes fabulous. You put it down in front of the customer, the person who's going to consume your wares there, so to speak. I don't know about this. This doesn't taste, et cetera, et cetera. How do you bridge that gap of the differences in, shall we say, tasting from one person to the next in terms of making sure that it's that they enjoy it? I mean, because again, that's part of it. It's like you can have the greatest of ambiance, you can have all of the necessary things to make the experience fantastic. And if the food, I'm just going to say, if the food tastes like crap, then all of the other stuff just goes out the window.
Yeah, it is pretty simple. The customer's always right. So, I do it to the best of my ability, and trying to, balance, make sure it's balanced, make sure it's seasoned, make sure there are layers of flavor. I craft it as well as I can. And when I approve it at the pass, and then it's taken to the customer, and the customer, sends it back, or the customer says, I need ketchup to put on this steak. That's their choice. That's their flavor, and we have to respect that. I know what it was when I sent it out, and as long as I've crafted it to the best of my ability. Recipes are the same way, and that's why I tell folks. Everybody's like, "Oh, can you give me a recipe? I want to follow this recipe." It's like recipes are more like guidelines, right? Use that. Recipes to me are a way to learn something. So you might be learning how to braise something. You might be learning how to make an emulsion. You might be learning how to bring some flavors together. So the other day I was sharing with someone a homemade basil fresh French sorrel mayonnaise, and the sorrel brings this almost vinegary kind of balance to it that works very well with the basil, and use that on things. But ultimately they take that and then craft that to their taste, to their experience. And that's where, again, culinary medicine is so different than nutrition, where you need to eat this and so many carbs and this, that. No, it's about your food experience, about what makes you happy. So instead of telling you what to eat, which is the traditional nutrient-centric approach, you need these nutrients, you need these foods, eat this, don't eat that. I'm asking you and I'm saying, hey, Richard, what do you like to eat? Is it a pizza? Is it a burger? Is it pasta? Okay, now let's find a healthy way to craft that in terms of how we source these ingredients, like you were talking about, avoiding the ultra processed ingredients, getting these quality ingredients that are going to feed not only our satisfaction with the meal, but nourish our body and feed our soul with the experience.
Well, it is very deep. It's very complex at times, but it does come down to what is it that you like. There is an alternative. I'll call it sort of a medicine practice, but it expands beyond that. It's called kinesiology that I learned, God, probably 35, maybe 40 years ago. Where you take your finger and you make the ring, kind of thing, and then you take the other hand, and then you do yes and no, and if it's yes, it holds. If it's no, it breaks, kind of thing. And after a while, you don't need to do that because that internal voice, if you will, tells you automatically, no, I don't think I want that. I want this over here. Questions kind of been gnawing at me since we started, and you started talking about the processed foods. And of course, they told us as we were growing up, even back in the 80s, always shop at the ends and back of the store. Don't shop in the middle, because that's where all the processed foods are. But I'm curious, are there any good processed foods as far as your experience? Are there really any good ones?
Yeah, so there's a quick distinction that we make between processed foods. So the pizza I'm making tonight is technically a processed food, right? I've taken my raw ingredients of flour, made a dough, sourdough dough, let that ferment. The cheese is what is a type of processed foods. So we use something that was developed at the University of Sao Paulo in Brazil just a little over 10 years ago called the NOVA classification, which looks at sort of raw ingredients, which might be raw milk. Then we look at, minimally processed things like our culinary ingredient like butter that we use in other things. Then we look at a processed food like the pizza I'm making. But then there's ultra processed foods. And so in our study of culinary medicine, we have specific criteria that we use to define them. And one of the things which is very underappreciated, but turns out to be incredibly important, is that in making ultra processed foods, we take the way nature has packaged it, what we call the food matrix, and we destroy it. We degrade it totally. And then we put it back together. And when we put it back together, we add things like these sugars, salts, fats, additives, preservatives, etc. And in this reassembling, we do something distinctly detrimental and altering the natural food stuff such that there's something just beyond the nutrient composition. And this has been shown in a number of studies, particularly a landmark one done by Kevin Hall at the NIH was published just a year or two ago, where he gave somebody diets, he matched diets, so exactly the same calories. And then not only exactly the same calories, exactly the same nutrients, same amount of fat, same amount of carbohydrates, same amount of sugar. So that the only difference in these two diets was one had ultra processed foods like Chef Boyardee ravioli, Honey Nut Cheerios, Lego My Eggos, etc. And then the other one had the same constituents, but they were all minimally processed foods like my homemade pizza or homemade pasta, etc. And what they found, the long and short of it, was when people ate ultra processed foods, they gained weight and levels and markers of inflammation went up. And then when they switched to minimally processed foods, those things went down and they spontaneously lost weight and they got better, like you did with your diabetes. Mm-hmm. And he said, I don't know what food scientists are doing, but whatever they're doing is making people, Americans, and many other people around the world sicker and fatter. And so there is something inherent in the destruction of the way nature packages our food. And then when we put it back together, that alters the way and the relationship we have with that food in our body. And there are some other things that we look at in terms of defining those ultra processed foods. So we specifically identified those foods as the ones we want to get off our plate. One of the number one sources of those types of foods in the American diet, Richard, you nailed it earlier, soft drinks. Mm-hmm. And it doesn't matter whether they have sugar or they have non-nutritive sweeteners. A study published just a few weeks ago looked at 4 popular zero-calorie sweeteners, including stevia, and found that they all alter our gut bacteria.
Mm. And just as a sidebar, is there a particular sweetener that is less detrimental or beneficial as opposed to some of these others?
Sure. So what I call these sort of sweeteners of redemption.
Hmm.
If you're making a dessert and special occasion, then I recommend, as you alluded to earlier, the Mexican Cokes, just use some real, table sugar, molecule sucrose and molecule glucose and fructose, table sugar. But if I'm working with things, I try to use something like maybe organic maple syrup. It has its own flavor profile, which intrigues me as a chef. It's also a source of other, valuable vitamins and minerals, things like manganese that we utilize in our diet. So honey, is another sort of sweetener of redemption. Been used for many, many years. Has antibacterial, antifungal properties in it. Lots of other compounds which are beneficial. So, for example, I have a coffee every morning. My wife has coffee. For years, she used the artificial creamers and artificial sweeteners. Now she uses nothing but a little bit of honey and natural organic cream, and she can't even go back to tasting those other things because when she tastes them, they taste funny. They've got sort of a chemical tone to it that she used to drink all the time, and now has totally broken herself of that habit. When people break those foods like you've done, those ultra processed foods, those sodas, the analogy for me as a cardiologist is when somebody finally quits smoking and they come back to me, 6 months later, and they're like, "Hey, doc, I don't know how I ever smoked 2 packs of cigarettes a day because I can't even walk into a room where somebody's smoking." I have literally had people say, "I can't walk into a fast food restaurant now because that smell of that oil, it makes me ill. But I used to crave that because I was addicted to it." So your personal journey and some of the things you shared, those are really, blueprints for folks to get away from these and start to embark on their own culinary medicine journey. It's a lot like, taking a horse to water. I mean, I give you all the tools. I can share the knowledge with you, but ultimately it's your journey, not mine.
Yeah.
And you have to be willing to take it.
And I think that the medical institution has done a grave disservice to its, I'll call them clients, by inculcating their minds with the theory that the doctor knows best. Now, if I've got a broken leg, or in my case, a year ago, I participated in an Olympic sport. It was called the gallbladder clean and jerk because I had a golf ball size gallstone, and my gallbladder was apparently very infected. But it felt like indigestion to me. By the way, I did score a gold medal in that particular category. It was quite exciting. The doctor frustrated me, though, because I says, "Well, while you're in there, could you take out my appendix? Because, someday it just may decide to go." And they say they don't know what it's there for. So she says, "No, because we don't do twofers." So there you go.
Well, actually, I will give you one thing that we think the appendix actually serves a vital function.
Wait a minute. You said we think? What do you mean we think?
Well, we don't know for sure. There's still, this is still an active area of investigation.
Mm-hmm.
But one of the things that it seems to do is it's a safety net. It's a kind of a reserve that when we do things and we have to take antibiotics and we destroy our gut bacteria, the appendix is a little reserve of our natural gut bacteria that then gets back into our intestines and helps seed and repopulate our gut with the healthy bacteria that should be there. Yeah. So don't get it out unless you need it.
Oh, okay. Well, she didn't take it out, so I still have it.
Good.
Well, I'll tell you what, we're talking with Chef Dr. Mike, and we're talking with him about a myriad of different issues regarding your health and well-being here on Tell Me Your Story. I'm Richard Dugan, your host, and it is really a pleasure to have Chef Dr. Mike here on the program talking about the work that he does. He has a book. It's entitled Food Shaman, The Art of Quantum Food, which I'm sure we've touched upon many areas that are located in that particular compendium. He's an interventional cardiologist, as well as a professional chef, a professor of culinary medicine. And of course, we've mentioned his website numerous times, chefdrmike.com. I would be very interested, just as we're wrapping things up here, in knowing what is the general health, based upon your living there, what's the general health of, shall we say, most Montanians, if that's the right term to use, because obviously you're around a lot of these folks. And in the movie, or the PBS special that I watched, I didn't see a lot of big people there.
Well, I'd say it's generally very helpful. One of the reasons I came up here, besides my position at the university, and that we love it so, is the people are generally very active. So, obviously Montana, big sky. So there's a lot to do outdoors, which means you're moving and you're doing things. And for me, connecting with nature, so many great opportunities and to connect with nature in different ways. And the food culture here, at least where I am in Western Montana, is really phenomenal. It's very supportive of local, very people want homegrown things. So I have a lot of great resources. On the PBS special, you saw my friend Troy. So I've got access to, grass finished, organically raised, humanely raised, bison. I've got another friend who raises a heritage breed of manganista pigs from Austria, which again are raised organically. I go out to the farm, I see how they're treated, I see what they eat, I check it out. We've got a CSA that I mentioned with a guy who is obsessed with his chickens. They live in this trailer that he drives. So they not only free range on the fields where he grows the vegetables, but then he takes them to different fields in their little condominium on wheels, so that they constantly have fresh things to eat in that field. Because most people don't realize chickens aren't vegetarians, they're omnivores. They're often eating bugs and getting other sources of proteins, and really supplies me with the best eggs I have ever bought or tasted anywhere, on the globe. So I'm just delighted with this. And this is Montana. It's wonderful. But for all the listeners, I'm sorry to say we're full. So
We're
sorry
full.
about that.
That's like saying Rhode Island is full. Only in the case of Montana or Nebraska or North or South Dakota or Wyoming, yeah, we're full. Go,
Yep,
don't come here.
sorry.
Yeah, and that's fine. I myself want to move to Ireland, so don't worry, I won't be moving there. But
We got a spot for you, Richard. You're
what's that
okay.
now? I'll visit. I'll tell you what.
There you go.
I'll visit. I won't move in, but I'll visit for a few weeks or a few days, what have you. What an experience. The one thing that kind of struck me though was, as you were walking through the area where they had the bison, I noticed that everything was still squared off. And why that brings the point to me is, I remember seeing the movie Temple Grandin, and how she was trying to encourage the cattlemen to make circular corrals and so forth, because that's how, for example, in that case, the cattle, that's how they functioned. That's how they moved around. They thought in curves and circles and so forth. So I'm wondering, that just is sort of a sidebar kind of thing, in terms of making them feel more comfortable and so forth. Very, very interesting. But I want to thank you so much for the time you've given us, and I hope that we get a chance to have you back again to talk about some other areas and issues, because there is so much to inform the public about, and we're not sitting here saying that you are the oracle. But we are saying you've got some information, you've got some source material, and at the same time, each individual that's listening needs to, as you put it, trust their gut.
Yep. Absolutely. Thank you, Richard, so much. This has just been so much fun. So great. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to share some information with the folks out there. Much appreciated.
ChefDrMike.com is the website. Will be linked, of course, so that folks can find out more about the work that you do. And before we wrap things up here, I want to let you, the listener and the viewer, know that you are listening to Tell Me Your Story. New paradigms for a new world, where we're giving you choices and knowledge of those choices to help make your dreams come true. Sundays at 7 a.m. and 7 p.m. Monday mornings at 1 a.m. And then we also have our special edition on Wednesdays at 9 a.m. We're streaming live at those times at richarddugan.com. The podcasts are on SoundCloud, iTunes, TuneIn Radio, Spotify, Stitcher, Player FM, Blueberry, iHeartRadio, Amazon Music, and many other locations. And we're on YouTube, where you can watch these interviews. And we certainly do hope that you go to our guest website. We also ask that you participate, as we've been talking in the latter part of this program, about going within, spending time with that still small voice, just being peaceful and quiet, and getting the guidance, especially when it comes to your own personal nutrition as well as your well-being during the decade of perfect vision. And if you'd like to support the work we're doing, every dollar that is sent to us via PayPal, we greatly appreciate it. Thank you, thank you, thank you to those who have and those who will help. PayPal is our means by which you can support us and be a part of the work that we're doing. It's there for your security as well as ours. We now move on to the last three questions that I have for you, Doc, that I ask all of my guests, Chef Doctor. And they are, number one, the first one, and I'll go with the title that we've been using throughout the program. Who is Chef Dr. Mike?
So Chef Dr. Mike has the spirit of a shaman, the soul of a pirate, and the heart of a hula girl.
Okay, you're throwing me off here. What is it that you hope to or want to achieve through the work that you are doing now?
I really want to empower people to, positively reconnect, reestablish, and reforge their unique relationship with their food experience, so that they can live healthier, longer, and happier lives. So, as you mentioned earlier, I want to be a resource for people, so they can take that information, take those techniques, apply it to their lives, and be healthier and happier. And I think that can maybe lower the temperature in both the literal and figurative sense of the times that we live in. Because when we're all happier and we share a good meal, it's pretty hard to be bitter and angry.
It really is. And finally, what is your life's purpose?
Culinary medicine. That's why I'm here.
Well, Chef Dr. Mike, I want to thank you so much once again for joining us here on the program. And I'd like to thank you for listening to and watching Tell Me Your Story. New paradigms for a new world. We're giving you choices and knowledge of those choices to help make your dreams come true. Until our next broadcast, podcast, videocast, love to Lal and Jeanette, I am listening.